I'm Betsy Chernoff, a Principal Product Marketing Manager at AWS. Thanks for joining Hybrid Cloud Day. I'm here with Jonah Bach, a distinguished engineer from LegalZoom, to talk about hybrid cloud migrations. Jonah, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me today, Betsy.
So let's dive in. LegalZoom recently underwent a migration and modernization initiative. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys went through and wanted to accomplish with this?
Yeah, the two larger themes that we wanted to accomplish were modernization and reducing operational complexity. So just to give you some background, we have been a company for 20 years. We've been around the block a bit. We had an on-prem environment running in Los Angeles that had your traditional virtual machine type environment. And it was quite a bit of complexity for us to keep running when we were processing tens of thousands of orders a month in our systems. And so what we wanted to do was make that environment easier to operate, and at the same time give our developers tooling that they one, enjoyed working in, and two, were able to be much more productive in. So that was kind of the context for our migration to AWS in the cloud.
Yeah, and I hear oftentimes both for migration and modernizations, they're quite common goals across, I think, almost every industry.
That's right.
And I know LegalZoom had workloads already running on AWS in the US West region, right?
That's right. Before we kicked off our larger migration effort, we had workloads running in AWS Lambda, as well as some basic container services. And these workloads were, I guess you could call them trial runs, really. A few applications that weren't mission critical to the business, but were still important, that we used to get our feet wet with AWS and really, try to understand, one, what the complexity was, and two, the benefits for our engineers of being able to deploy things quickly, seeing how things were running and quickly react to changes as they needed to. So we ran those for about a year before we started our larger effort, and really after that year realized that we really wanted to go all in on the cloud in AWS.
So I know LegalZoom had workloads already running on AWS in, I think, the US West region, right?
That's right. Yeah, we had workloads running on AWS Lambda and a few of the container services for about 6 months to a year before we decided to launch our larger scale migration effort. Those workloads were really, I would say, like a foot in the water for us to test out how AWS worked for our company, and both in terms of like developer productivity, operational overhead, and just overall user experience. So we spent 6 months with those services, really liked what we saw, and decided to kick off a larger migration effort. And that larger migration effort really entailed taking the core of our business, kind of the technology assets that run the entire company, and moving them to the cloud. And that's a pretty, for a 20-year-old company, that's a lot of technology. And so we really wanted to figure out a way where we could take those hundreds of applications, if not thousands, and move them to AWS without doing it in we would call a big bang migration, where overnight everything is running in AWS. So as we kind of got down that rabbit hole, we saw AWS local zones pop up and realized that because we were in LA and the local zones were in LA, that it might be a route for us to take to actually migrate our applications more piecemeal. So instead of 100 at once, maybe it's one application at once, 2, 3. It really let us do a very piecemeal approach to migrating our applications over, while at the same time not having to solve the big boulders that we had around our larger databases or our workloads that had very sensitive latency requirements, because it was so close to our data center.
Yeah, and depending on how complex they are, I know, especially latency sensitive interdependencies can make really any migration quite challenging. Now with LegalZoom's migration mostly behind you, I think your hybrid architecture is now distributed between your data center and its applications. And from what I've heard, those applications are now modernized with microservices architectures that are also running on AWS local zones, right?
That's right. So when we started our migration, we had a couple of members on the team that were really experienced with containers and kind of the container ecosystem. So we looked at using Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service, or EKS, to power that migration. And as we kind of delve deeper in the local zones, we realized that we were able to actually take the EKS service that was running in the US West 2 region we were using, and actually run that in the local zone as well. And so it allowed us to, in a matter of really just a couple of weeks, spin up additional subnets in our VPC for the local zones, deploy Kubernetes worker nodes there, and then actually run containers of our latency sensitive applications in the local zone that had millisecond or even sub-millisecond in some cases latency back to our data center. So we were able to move them over without any customer impact, which was great.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit, I'm sure, for LegalZoom and for your customers.
Yeah, it's certainly been easier operationally. We've been using services like Amazon's certificate manager on AWS, auto scaling groups, lots of features that let us just let the application run itself, and we can spend more time focusing on our customers and adding new product features that delight them.
Which brings me to another point that I think we often hear about over here. Jonah, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about your experience, both from your developers as well as IT productivity. How is local zones or even the broader hybrid architecture that you've been able to create, how has that helped, or has it helped?
Yeah, no, it's helped immensely. Moving to this hybrid architecture where we're using AWS services that are all API driven, we've been able to automate a lot of our developer workflows so that, before the migration, we were in on-prem. A developer might spend days or weeks waiting on a ticket to be processed by 3 to 5 people to provision their service, whereas now, within a matter of minutes, they click a button, fill out a form, and all of the infrastructure is built out for them. So for our developers, it's been a huge win in productivity gains. They're able to really just spend that time building and not just waiting on service tickets or other items like that. And the same on the IT operations side. We had a pretty large build out in our data center for our call center technology. And as part of this migration, we've been able to move to Amazon Connect, and that's just reduced the operational burden significantly. We don't have drop calls anymore. We don't have to have IT folks that specialize in VoIP in the data center, understanding how things are working, understanding why things are breaking. We're able to just run the call center without really any intervention from a technology team now. So that's been great.
So it sounds like the ability to use the same AWS services and tools, APIs, the whole kit and caboodle has really had an impact across LegalZoom's business. Jonah, thank you so much for your insights on LegalZoom's migration and modernization with AWS Local Zones. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for having me here today.
Now for our last session around migration and modernization, back to you, Jeremiah.